Uh-oh. There we go. We are live. Hold on. Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Doesn't know how to work this stream thing here. And that is, of course, Athlon Steven Lassan over there, senior editor, Athlon Sports. Steven, how's it going, my man?
Mike, it is going great. Always good to be talking some ball here on SEC After Dark. We're 1 week closer to the Athlon Sports Magazine hitting newsstands, so getting excited for all of the great SEC fans to get that product real soon.
Right, and 100 days officially as of today. A lot of people will be listening to this tomorrow, Stephen. It'll be 99 days till SEC football, but like I always say, college football, it's right around the corner when you get that Athlon Sports College Football Preview magazine in your hands. So I can't wait to have that. I've not even told you about this, Stephen, but I was thinking it'd be fun to do. We might do some kind of like contest or something. Maybe we do some trivia, and we'll let listeners of this live show, whoever they answer first, I'm willing to buy, say like 5 Athlon Sports Preview magazines to ship it on out to you. So let us know. Maybe next week we can get that organized, but I'm happy to do that. Just my little way of saying thanks and supporting Athlon Preview magazine.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate that. I joke about this often. We're trying to sell as many magazines as possible. I mean, the harsh reality of this is, and if you go to the newsstand now, it's really hard to find sports magazines. I mean, I got to wade through all the time and entertainment magazines to try and find the one sports magazine in the very back. So as many magazines as we can sell, we would greatly appreciate. So this is my sort of plea. I'm sort of going to hijack the show for a few minutes here. Please, if you like college football, if you love the SEC, please pick up an Athlon Sports magazine. It's only a national edition, so it's got 1-page previews for all the teams, but there's a ton of stuff in there outside of that. And hopefully, if we sell enough magazines, maybe we can bring back the SEC regional magazine at some point too. So, yeah, I'd be excited to do that. We've got a ton of content from that magazine we can talk about all summer too. So there's no off season in my college football world here.
Right. Steven has already teased. He's not giving away any information even to me, but he has teased the Coach Anonymous comments, and what a delight some of those are. So I can't wait to dig into those when we get a little bit closer to the magazine time. But Steven, again, you came up with a great idea for this show, over under SEC win totals. Now that we're post-spring, Steven and I, Shane and I have talked quite a bit about these, but Steven and I, we're going to pick a side for each SEC team. So get your donations in now. We'll put your team to the front of the list. But Steven, he was even asking me right before we went on air, he said, can I push on these over-under win totals? I said, no, sir, you may not. You ain't Vegas. So we're going to be taking a stand for all of these.
Man, this is tough. I don't know why I suggested this to you. I've been sweating these out ever since I suggested the idea and we agreed on doing it because, man, some of these are so close. Vegas has these picked so on the button for some of these win totals, and I'm kind of wrestling with that in my mind. So I guess I'll land on a side eventually, right? We have to take a side, so I guess I better pick, right?
We have to, Steven. Yeah. Again, we'll get to that in just a minute. 2 things right off the top here, Steven. We have to talk about Jaden Rashada, because the guy that won't go away for Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, that's basically what he is. And I don't know whether they're happy or not about this, Steven, because, again, Jaden Rashada's in the news once again. It was widely reported. He is suing. He's not suing Florida. He's suing Billy Napier. He's suing, I believe, the collective and the booster that allegedly promised him this $13.5 million. Very, very complicated story. But essentially, he is claiming that Miami offered him something like $10 million. I think it's $9.5 million. He turned that down to take the $13.5 from Florida. So that is why he is suing for $10 million for Florida, because he said, hell, had I went to Miami, I would have got that money. And Florida reneged on all the money that he was promised to attend. And again, just when we thought this story was behind us, Steven, Jaden Rashada is now a Georgia Bulldog. I'm sure Kirby just absolutely loves the fact that Billy Napier is getting sued. can't help recruiting. I don't know how much it hurts it, but it cannot help it. Thoughts on all this, Stephen?
I mean, as if the Georgia-Florida rivalry needed more spice, right? Like a potential starting quarterback for Georgia, potentially, I say, because I think Gunnar Stockton will probably end up being the starting quarterback next year for Georgia, suing a rival school. I think, I think in the big picture of this, I think what's interesting to me is sort of the inner workings, sort of the behind the scenes. Some of the reporting kind of gave us a little details about some of the conversations that some of these parties were allegedly having. I think the worst thing about this is, like, if you're Florida, this goes to like into actual discovery mode and you start learning more details, and it could look even worse for Billy Napier. I think that's kind of where I'm at in this point, is that, it's the worst possible news that Florida could use in a year where Billy Napier needs to win, I would say at least get to a bowl game to save his job. Like, it's just a distraction and kind of an unnecessary story that you don't want in a pretty critical year. So a lot of intrigue for me to see where this goes, to kind of learn some more of the inner workings. But for now, I think the biggest thing is, like, it's just the worst case scenario for Florida to have this out there and
Right.
at this critical time for the program.
And as cousin Tim points out, Florida has given new meaning to Gator bait. It's baiting these guys to get into school and then not giving them their bag. I hate to see it. Hey, Steve, we got 15 era. He gave us a donation. Appreciate you for Texas Longhorns. So we're going to do them first here in just a second. But again, we'll get to that. One other thing I had, thanks to Steven. Steven really hooked it up with some knowledge, some information here. This is going to be the first. Steven and I have talked about it. I've talked about it on other shows. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to people that put out the returning production figures, but they don't make any sense to me anymore because everybody's including transfers and whatnot. So I'm blowing that up, starting from scratch, and I'm doing my own SEC returning production figures for the upcoming football season. And I'm going to start with the offensive line, and I already have the data thanks to Steven. He provided these numbers, and then I kind of just put them all together here. But here's a graphic. If you're just listening back later, that Texas leads the SEC in offensive line snaps returning. 83% of Texas's outstanding offensive line is back. It's a big reason why the Longhorns, a lot of people are high on them this season. I'm already getting questions. Well, someone at Florida said, well, we're returning 4 or 5 starters against Florida State. Well, that's not what I'm gauging here. I'm gauging, we literally counted every single snap taken by an offensive lineman in the SEC or Texas and Oklahoma as well. Every single offensive lineman that saw the field for a snap, we counted all those up. Are they back or are they gone? That's all this is. So Texas leads the way, 83%. Kentucky a second. I didn't realize that, but again, maybe this supports some of those models that has Kentucky as the number one returning production leader in the SEC. 78% of Kentucky's offensive line. LSU's outstanding offensive line, 75%. Georgia, 74%. And let me just ask you about 3 of these top 4, Stephen. Texas, LSU, and Georgia. I think this is a big reason why so many people look at these 3 as having arguably, there's debate on which team has the best offensive line in the SEC. But the fact that Texas, LSU, and Georgia are all in the top 4 of returning production, how much faith does that give you in that at least one of these 3 will be, maybe the best offensive line in the country?
I would agree with that. I think those are 3 of the 4 top offensive lines in college football. I think I may have voted Georgia number 1 at some point this offseason, but I think you can make a pretty compelling case for Texas. 4 out of 5 starters coming back. You also look at LSU, the 2 studs at tackle. They got, I think there's still a really solid foundation there with 4 starters back. So all of those groups right there, I think 3 out of the 4 top ones in the country. So I think it's not a total surprise to see the snaps returning kind of match up with some of the preseason All-America, All-SEC buzz out there to see who's coming back. But I think the first thing that kind of jumps out to me, though, outside of the top teams, is when you look at the kind of the next tier, Kentucky, I think a team that with a first-time quarterback, a new coordinator, they're replacing Ray Davis, that foundation on the offensive line, that getting that big blue wall back together, you're turning 78% of your offensive line snaps. That could be a real big check in Kentucky's favor, trying to take some of the pressure off of that quarterback. A&M, that's an offensive line that I think has got some potential to be better. They just haven't had the right coaching staff in place. There's kind of an opportunity for them to turn things around, but also, Ole Miss bringing back 65% plus adding some guys in the transfer portal that could either start or provide quality depth. Like that offensive line can easily, I think, be a top 10 offensive line in the country this season. So I think a lot of that data kind of matches up with some of the preseason thinking. And I should note too, I think on the snaps and the start thing, like you mentioned, it's easy for us to tell, like when a starting quarterback is in and out of the game. It's really hard in the offensive line. Like I see this every year, putting together returning starters. There's a difference between just starting a game and also like how many snaps guys get, because they rotate so much. So I think this is a pretty good way to kind of tell us returning line talent and production, and also kind of to weigh that what it might mean for the season, rather than just looking at returning starters from the end of the year.
And shout out to cousin Michael Raleigh in the comments. He says, doesn't matter how much you return if they suck to begin with, which that is quite the eloquent statement. It very true indeed. But again, if you're Texas, LSU, Georgia, you were already good on the offensive line. You're bringing these guys back. That's why there's so much reason for optimism. A&M 66%, they're fifth. Ole Miss, you just shouted them out, Steven, 65. They've added the transfers, should be even better. Vanderbilt, that surprised me at 60%. Auburn, 59. Mizzou, 58. And one thing I'll say quickly about Mizzou, I didn't realize this until I looked at the snaps, Steven, but Missouri had essentially 5 offensive linemen that played the entire season, and that was it. And they lost 2 of them. Of course, they added. This does not include transfers, so that's critical. They added Caden Green from Oklahoma. They added, I believe, a couple others. So
Marcus Bryant from SMU, another one from Missouri.
There you go. So again, I'm not saying they're we're in a horrible state here, but it was just wild to see essentially just 5 linemen took 90% of the snaps for Missouri. That's credit to them for staying healthy and having a great year. But that seemed like an outlier based on all these other teams. South Carolina, 58%. Tennessee, 58%. And the reason for Mizzou, South Carolina, and Tennessee, all 58 in that order, was decimal points. I just didn't want to muddy this up with decimal points. Florida, 54. Alabama, 52. Arkansas, 41. Oklahoma, 17. Oh, Lord. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Mississippi State, 4% of the offensive snaps return for the Bulldogs. But to Michael Raleigh's point, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't know that it was for Mississippi State, given what we saw from them last year. You know what?
Could mean also Arkansas as well, considering we know the troubles that offensive line had last year. I know probably Oklahoma fans are tired of talking about the offensive line, but this data kind of only sort of solidifies kind of what some of the preseason buzz has been. And plus, too, I mentioned this to you last week, but some of the coach scouting that we have in our magazine, I think coaches looking at Oklahoma coming into the league are kind of skeptical about their line of scrimmage this year. And I think there's some doubt about how well it'll hold up when they get into SEC play relative to compared who they played in the Big 12 and now with the defenses they're trading out for. And that data kind of only gets at it, which is why they went so heavy in the transfer portal to get help this offseason.
Yep. All right, Steven, so let's get into it. We got 16 teams to hit on here, over, under, post-spring picks. Steven and I were going to make our picks for every team. Get your donation in now to get your team to the front of the list. And we already got one, Steven, so we're going to go Texas here. The over-under for them Texas Longhorns coming in the SEC, going to kick everybody's ass, taking names and all this stuff. Over-under, 10.5 wins for Texas. And as always, I have to say this in case you're unaware. These numbers, 10.5, it's just regular season. Does not count SEC championship, does not count bowl, and of course now we have to say playoff. So this is just out of 12. How many's Texas projected to win it based on the over-under win total? 10.5. You going over, under on the Texas Longhorns first season in the SEC.
Mike, this is a tough one because I think Texas is going to be very highly ranked at the end of the year. I think they're going to be like probably the number 5-6 team in the college football playoff because I like Georgia to win the SEC. I'm going to go with 10-2. I'm going to go with the under here. I think, first of all, they will be an underdog, probably in just one game. That's Georgia. I do sort of build in an element of chaos to all these teams. They may have a surprise loss somewhere. They have to go to A&M. You also look at the game against Arkansas, which a couple years ago was a buzzsaw that they ran into. And of course, we know Oklahoma. So I'm kind of counting a little bit of an adjustment to the league. That road game against Texas A&M later in the season is going to be pretty tricky. You also look back to last season, a couple close calls in Big 12 play. Kansas State, TCU. So I would not be surprised to see kind of a surprise loss there for Texas. But I still like them very highly ranked. I've just got them 10-2.
Oh, Steven. Let me tell you why you are wrong. Come on. You said it yourself, Steven. I get it. This is the SEC, and I get it. This is what we do in the offseason. We look at it. We say, well, who do they got to beat? They got to beat Oklahoma on a neutral field. They got to beat Michigan, which is in shambles. Their cheating ways. Their cheating coach left, and the half the roster left with him. So basically, Georgia and Oklahoma. So they got to split those. If they split those, we're going to hit the over. Well, just like you said, Steve, we're overlooking a trip to A&M, trip to Arkansas. Heck, I think, it's probably not realistic, but even teams like Mississippi State on a different year, you cannot overlook them. And probably this year, that's Kentucky. This year, it's Florida. If Florida's as good as I think they can be, again, I would favor Texas in those games. I'm not crazy, but this is the SEC. And last time I checked, Texas loses to Kansas and all these garbage Big 12 teams seemingly on an annual basis, except for last year, and they found a way to lose to Oklahoma. So give me the under. This is one of the more confident ones I am. So I'm going, maybe like 9-3.
Oh man. Yeah, I think that kind of you summed it up there. And I think with all these teams, you sort of have to build in like there's going to be not all the good teams are going to beat all the bad teams in the league. There's going to be a pretty strong middle class, especially in the SEC. So I think you're going to see some of these teams that are in the middle and in the bottom will pick off some of these teams at the top, which will hurt the win total, which, like I said, I still got Texas at 10-2. I've got them at number 4 in the country exiting the spring. I think they're very much a contender to get to the national championship game. SEC, though, first year, you also look at some of the defensive concerns coming into the year. I think 10-2 is not like crazy to think they get that total.
Right. And I apologize because I said you're wrong, but you picked the under just as I did. But again, I like to kid the Texas people because they're so defensive. But let me throw it to you this way, Steven. Let's hype them up a little. Let's say they do go 10-2, which is, I think, any year in the SEC, that's one heck of a record. Let's assume, and it shouldn't be, we can't say they can't beat Georgia. That would not stun me at all if they beat Georgia. The game is in Austin. But let's just assume that is a loss. What is another one, as you project today, Steven, that Texas could lose and still make the college football playoff? Because honestly, if they're losing to, not that this would ever happen, but like if they're losing to Vanderbilt, if they're losing to Arkansas, if they're losing to Mississippi State, that's a kind of game that could potentially cost you that playoff spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%, Mike. I think when you look at their schedule, I think the first game that kind of jumps out is that September 7th game against Michigan. Michigan will be picked as a preseason top 10 team, even with some of the losses they have. It's on the road. You could understand it early in the season. Outside of that, I think you get into some of the games that we were kind of talking about. The Oklahoma game, I think Oklahoma, despite some of the personnel challenges, is still going to be one of the, might be the best 8-4, 7-5 team and we've seen in college football in some time. But also that season finale at Texas A&M, the fact that the rivalry is back. A&M has been waiting for this one to get Texas at its place after the loss in the last game. So I think either any of those three games, I think Texas could still get to 10-2 and be fine. I think all three of those, counting the Georgia loss, obviously, but Oklahoma, A&M, and Michigan, any of those three, they'd be fine, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right, Steven. So this is one where I know you've been Man, you've been losing sleep here, Steven. Let's go Alabama, 9.5, over under win total. First year under Kalen DeBoer. Where are you leaning right now? Over under Alabama, 9.5.
So I'm going to follow my formula that I mentioned with Texas. I'm going to build in some chaos. I'm going to take Alabama on the under. I'm going to go 9-3 for Kalen DeBoer.
Ooh.
So I think first of all, when you look at the schedule, at Tennessee, at Oklahoma, and of course there's the game against Georgia, they have to go to LSU. I think a couple of those road games are going to be pretty tricky for Alabama. So I'm giving them a loss to Georgia. I think Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma, one of those. We also know that Auburn gave Alabama trouble last year. I just think with all the transition, I'm kind of building in a loss somewhere along the way. So I'm going 9-3 right now for Alabama, but still top 10 in the country.
Yeah, and as I sit here, and again, we've kind of discussed this, so I don't want to just rehash the same points over and over, Stephen. But defense is losing a ton. Obviously, Nick Saban gone. Defensive backfield completely retooled, which doesn't mean they won't have talent. They certainly have talent, but they could take their lumps. Let's say that they're gonna hate that I even suggest this, Stephen. But let's say they play like Ole Miss the last couple of years, where they're very exciting on offense. They can outscore nearly everybody they play, but when they face a dynamic offense, a dynamic quarterback, they get lit to shreds. And again, I'm not saying that they'd be losing all these games. And again, we're talking Alabama here, so who are we even talking about? Maybe Georgia, maybe at Tennessee, Mizzou, at LSU, at Oklahoma. Those are kind of the games. Maybe Auburn, if they get it all figured out. They're not going to get lit up in all these games. But basically, my question to you, my roundabout rambling way here, Stephen. If Alabama, let's say they win 11 games, but they're giving up 30 points per game, do you think the fans are going to be happy with that kind of performance?
Man, that's a really good question, right? I think winning's all that matters. I do think if thinking ahead a little bit, their defense, if it's not, I don't want to read too much into the spring game, but I do think that the secondary could be a concern. Now, that being said, I do like what they did in the portal in the spring. Deshaun Jones, the transfer from Wake Forest, I think could be a really nice player. Same thing for King Mack, the safety that came in for Penn State. They added some help there. So I think they've at least fortified that group. But I think winning kind of overcomes all that. Like I think especially if the Kalen DeBoer plus Jalen Milroe formula hits and you're scoring a lot of points, I think Alabama's going to play a pretty exciting brand of ball, but the defense might be kind of worse than certainly the last, 10, 15 years under Nick Saban.
Right. Well, now you may be completely right, Steve. All they care about is winning championships, all that. But I kind of set you up for that one because I've already came in mind with logic to while that won't be the case. And I'll give you no further evidence than the Florida Gators post Steve Spurrier. Fun and gun. Oh, I guess you could, Urban Meyer, we got to throw him into that as well because he was winning at a high level. But, I mean, McElwain and Muschamp, it's kind of silly to put them in the same regard as those guys. But, it was particularly McElwain is what I'm thinking. They were ineffective on offense. They had a really good defense, and the fans were still pissed. And they were winning division title every year. You know what I mean? So we get spoiled as fans. And how will Alabama respond if they can't stop the run? And every time they're in a big-time situation, their defense caves? I don't know. I mean, that's like $1 million question that no one has an answer to. But I think that's going to be interesting this season.
I think what also would worry me a little bit, and you mentioned the schedule for Alabama. You just go, we talked about this on their non-conference schedule. I mean, Western Kentucky, I'm not saying WKU or South Florida can beat Alabama, but they have good offenses too. So early in the season, they will be tested. Then you get into the quarterbacks of the SEC, which is really the storyline for me of this year is how many great quarterbacks and offenses there could potentially be here. I mean, you got Carson Beck, Nico, Brady Cook, Garrett Nussmeier, Jackson Arnold, an improved Auburn receiving core. We'll see about Peyton Thorne if he can take a step forward. But for a team that's got some defensive questions. The quarterbacks on this slate, like we talked about, last week, are really good. So that would worry me if I'm Alabama. But I think on the positive side, if you're kind of thinking ahead to the season, I think maybe one thing that if I was an Alabama fan that would sort of give me a little bit of confidence. It does seem like the recruiting question under Kalen DeBoer, would he maintain what Nick Saban has done, or at least be in the same ballpark? I think he's off to a pretty good start so far. So I think if the recruiting's going well, they're scoring points, they're still winning 10, 11 games, they're in the mix to make the playoff, they don't lose like in huge fashion to Georgia or something.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm stretching here a little bit, but I think there won't be too many craziness in Tuscaloosa about the first year. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm too optimistic. I don't know.
Right. Well, I think, and I would lean under as well, Stephen, but I think it's going to come down to that Georgia game, because I think we all assume that Georgia will beat Alabama, even though it's in Tuscaloosa. It's again, not a certainty by any means, but we got to lean Georgia. So basically now we're saying at best 11-1, and with road games, Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma, throw in the home games, Mizzou and Auburn. I mean, I can't imagine you go 4-1 in that stretch. So I think they'll probably go. If they beat Georgia, maybe they could even go undefeated if they beat Georgia. But
absolutely,
I think 11-1 would be a kind of the more realistic, even with a win over Georgia. But so I'm giving that a loss. I don't know. Their margin for error would be so slim. I'm tempted to say 10-2, Stephen, but I just think this is a tough draw. And it's one of those where had they got Tennessee and LSU at home, which they'll get next year, obviously, and they had last year. I think we're going to get back to that, Stephen, where under Nick Saban, we didn't have to worry about the years we were going to this place and having them here because we had Nick Saban and we had the best of all time. Now you're in the league with the rest of us to where we have to circle certain years where we get Florida and Alabama at home, as opposed to years we got them on the road. We're just building to the next year. And I think that's where Alabama's going to be.
Also, I think the timing of that Oklahoma game is terrible. Like a week before playing Auburn, you have to go on the road to Oklahoma, who I think will be pretty hungry to get Alabama and Norman and try to knock them off. So I think just the overall transition is the biggest unknown. I think if Nick Saban was still the coach, the odd thing about like preseason rankings is you would almost just pencil them in probably top 4 somewhere, just assuming that they'll reload. But this is kind of uncharted territory. It's the first time in a long time that we've got this many preseason question marks about Alabama.
Right. All right, Stephen. So let's get down next to Arkansas. And it was 5, Stephen, when it opened, but they've changed it to, it was 5.5. Now it's 5. Over under win total for them Arkansas Razorbacks. Big year for Sam Pittman and company. Got to get off to a fast start here if they're going to, save his job. Where would you lean right now, Stephen? Over under 5 wins for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Since I can't take a push, got to pick a side. I would probably play the under here. So I think Arkansas will go 3-1 in non-conference play. I think the question is, can you find 2 wins in SEC play? Probably. There's a good chance. We look at their home schedule. What's in the home and road schedule to me is pretty interesting in the SEC because you've got, the better teams on the schedule are coming to Fayetteville. Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas. Of course, they go on the road to play Missouri. But your swing games, I would call them that, are Auburn and Mississippi State, and they're on the road. So that makes it a little tough here. So I just think with that schedule, and with the question marks this team has, I'm not sold that the offensive line is going to be drastically better. I do like Taylon Green plus Bobby Petrino, but I'm going to take the under here for Arkansas.
God. That breaks my heart, Steven. Breaks my heart because I'm a Razorback at my core here. But how can I disagree with you, Steven, again? I mean, we're on the same page. I mean, I want it to be over. Heck, they probably would appreciate me going under the way I've been hyping the Razorbacks up the last couple of years. But again, there's potential here. But I'm worried about the offensive line again, Steven. And I don't know why in the world that is the case under Sam Pittman, but it is. I know we've loaded up on some transfers that we hope will fix that, and hopefully it will. But again, that Oklahoma State game, that'll loom large. And even you just kind of projected, that they'll drop that one, and they more than likely they will. I mean, that's just given what we've seen from Arkansas. But under Sam Pittman, I would say this too, Stephen. I think seemingly every year they play a lot better at the start of the year than they do at the end. Of course, you want it to be the exact opposite. That's the problem here. But again, so I call Oklahoma State a complete toss-up because I never know what to make of them. I don't care what they got coming back. They'll win 11 games, but they'll lose to South Alabama. I mean, they just did that last year. So can Arkansas go in there and win? Certainly. I think they can. Mike, the mullet, he's a madman. I don't know what his deal is, but he drops games like this all the time. So if we can get that one, we can get to 6. But I just hate – I love and I hate this schedule because you said it, Stephen. I mean the ones that you really got a chance in SEC play, I think, Auburn, Mississippi State, and I would even throw A&M in there. Those are the more attainable SEC games. They're all away from home. Now, you could flip it and say, well, getting Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas at home gives us a fighting chance, and I would agree with that. But then you look at something like this, home field records for Arkansas has got the second worst home record of the last 5 seasons in the entire SEC. So I don't know how much that really helps you. So I kind of have to lean the under here, and it breaks my heart. And I think I just willed them to go over because I'm picking them to go under.
If we're looking for a little positivity in that early season schedule with Oklahoma State, I think the good news is with Arkansas playing Arkansas Pine Bluff on Thursday night, get a few extra days to get ready for that Oklahoma State game. So I think that game by no means is guaranteed win for Oklahoma State. I think that Oklahoma State will be favored, but I think the positive thing is for Arkansas, you're going to have a little bit of time to prep here. And you mentioned last year Oklahoma State got off to just a slow, terrible start, and it kind of looked like Mike Gundy's done at Oklahoma State. But he ended up rallying to get into the Big 12 championship game. So they're a little bit of a wild card early in the year. But I think we've talked about Arkansas this offseason. It really just comes down to that offensive line and Taylon Green. For me, I do think, regardless of final record, I think this team will be much more competitive than they were at the end of last season where they got blown out by Missouri and Auburn. I think they'll be a very feisty team, even if they are 5-7.
Right. And maybe, of course, they've said this before, Stephen, but maybe, and I'm not calling out any players or anything like this, but maybe losing some of the guys they did will be a good thing. That can certainly happen as well. But all right, let's move on, Stephen. How about my favorite coach in the SEC, the Auburn Tigers, Stephen? 7.5 over under win total year 2 under Hugh the Snake Freeze, and that's not my nickname, Stephen. That is the nickname given to Hugh Freeze by the Orr or Michael Orr and Sean Toohey family. Go read The Blind Side if you don't believe me. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Stephen, 7.5 over under for Hugh Freeze and company, year 2.
I probably should let you go first in this one, but I'll be happy to go first, Bat. I will take the under here for Auburn. There are some things I like about the schedule for Auburn. 8 home games, 5 of them at home to start the season. They also get Vanderbilt, I think the worst team in the SEC. You also look at some of the games that they get at home: A&M and Oklahoma and Arkansas. 3 of your toss-ups, they're at home. And I think this team is trending up. I don't know how far they can get this year, but I think just the fact that they've solidified the receiving core, we'll see if all the coaching changes result in a better kind of mesh of the staff. But I think 7-5 would be a good step forward for this team. I'm just not sure that the upside is there at quarterback relative to some of these other teams. They're in a better spot, but I'm taking the under at 7-5.
Ooh. Oh, Stephen, if I could give you a donation right now, I probably would. Them Auburn Tigers, 7-5. Man, what kind of... Oh, baby. Hold on a second. Hold on. Stop talking about this sorry team, because Cousin Rick just gave us a $50 donation. Appreciate you, Cousin Rick. Woo. I'll donate enough to buy 17 copies of the magazine if you will sign the copies and award one copy to each team's top cousin. Y'all pick the top cousin winners. Love all SEC teams, fan spirit in the show. Giggum, what an idea, Cousin Rick.
I love it. Thanks, Rick.
I will definitely. I'll sign every dang copy I can get my hands on. So that's one heck of an idea. I love it. But we'll do Texas A&M after we get done burying Hugh Freeze here, Stephen, because Cousin Rick's a big Aggie. But Auburn 7. This might stun you, Stephen. That's what I like to do. I like to stun. I like to leave the people guessing here. I think I'll lean over, Stephen. I really do. Now, again, do I feel comfortable about it? No, because I think Georgia on the road, Missouri on the road, Alabama on the road. I feel like they're not guaranteed losses, but I feel pretty confident about those being losses for the Auburn Tigers. So basically, we've got one. We can only go one more loss. So I'm looking at Oklahoma and A&M. So can you split both of them at home? Heck, you could probably win both of them. So I think I'm leaning over, Stephen, but just slightly. 8-4. I don't know if Auburn can win nine games given this road gauntlet they have in the middle, and I'm not writing off Kentucky being a loss necessarily. We still don't know what we have in Mike Elko as a head coach. We respect, at least in this conference, he did a good job at Duke, and I think he'll have A&M rolling eventually. But I'm not sold on that being this year. Give me the over on the Auburn Tigers 8-4. I think I feel a little bit better about that.
I hope you didn't hear me fall out of my chair. I figured you were going under. I thought it was I tried to guess before we started, where you would end up just to see if we'd have some differences. And I figured you would take the under. So,
yep.
Yeah.
All right. How about Cousin Rick's team, Stephen? This is one of the hardest ones to peg. The Maggies, Texas A&M, 8.5 over under. Again, one sportsbook's got them favored, Stephen, in every single game outside of the Texas affair. This is a wild one, but given all the transfers and the new coaching staff, a lot of uncertainty here. Where would you lean for the Aggies over under 8.5?
I promise I'm not saying this because Rick made a really generous donation to the show tonight, but I am taking the over here for Texas A&M. I think, first of all, a couple reasons to buy the over. I love the home schedule. They're getting all their tough games at home. Certainly road trips to Auburn and Florida are going to be difficult, but getting Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, and Texas, all top 15 teams in College Station where I think under Mike Elko, there's sort of a renewed energy by this team. I think he's saying all the right things this offseason, kind of about the team culture, team identity. So I like what I'm hearing out of College Station, trying not to buy too much into the offseason hype here, but I love the schedule. Also, the more that I look at what Mike Elko did at Duke and the fact that they won 5 games in the 2 years prior to his arrival and then won 9 his first season and probably would have at least won a few more games last year had their starting quarterback not get injured. That turnaround is really, really impressive at one of the kind of toughest power conference jobs. And he's working with a lot more talent here. Connor Wigman, and I think their defense is going to take a step forward too. So long way of saying it, give me the over for Texas A&M.
Right. And I don't know if you caught this, Stephen, but yesterday we were talking about breakout quarterbacks in the SEC. I threw Connor Wigman as one to watch. I had kind of forgotten. He's got a 16-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Against SEC competition, he's got 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in his limited showing. I mean, he's thrown for a ton of yards here. I get the uncertainty over A&M, and it's fun to make the 8-4 jokes. I made them, and Jimbo's garbage, all this, that, and the other. But, I think you hit on something really important there. Because, again, I'm not as sold on LSU as everybody. I'm not as sold on Texas as everybody. Now, I am higher, seemingly, than anybody on Florida Gators. So I might be talking out both sides of my mouth, but will Billy Napier even be the coach by September 14th, or will he be getting sued to get fired? I don't know. But you could easily talk me into Texas A&M beating Gainesville. They may not be an upset by September 14th, given what Florida does against Miami and what A&M does against Notre Dame. So I'm right there with you, Stephen. And not only would I lean towards 9-3, I think 10-2 is a very realistic proposition for A&M. Again, that Texas game is going to be tough. You get them at home. Mizzou, I think, is going to be incredible. You get them at home. It doesn't guarantee you anything, but it gives you a real fighting shot. And if you can get over Notre Dame, and if you beat Notre Dame, I think every team on this schedule is beatable for Texas A&M. And that doesn't mean they're going 12-0, but again, in game one, year one, Mike Elko, if you're beating a top 20-ish team, I think the sky's the limit for you.
I agree with you. I think I think they will be. Well, it's hard for me to guess what the sports books will do because sometimes they surprise me. But I would take A&M over Notre Dame right now, just straight up. I also think to some of the, for as bad as Jimbo was, I think there's a chance that this goes completely different direction right off the bat, just because of how I think the players and I think the program are going to respond to Mike Elko. And I think we already saw that, like I mentioned, at Duke. So just sort of a fresh start. They're not hurting for talent. That's the biggest thing here. They're not starting from ground zero. It's not a year zero. It's year one and prepare for takeoff because they have so many intriguing pieces coming back. And they've got the quarterback, like you mentioned. I'm buying Connor Wigman stock. So give me A&M the over. That's one of the ones I feel better about.
And one final thing I'll say on A&M, Stephen, we're going to go to Ole Miss next. We got a donation here, but we have such a short-term memory. We got to remember, when Mike Elko was the defensive coordinator at A&M, they had one of the best defenses in the country.
Yeah.
And that took a step back because they had DJ Durkin, who's now at Auburn. Great hire there by Hugh. But, again, that's all I'm going to say on that one. But
hey, Mike, by the way, I think is there enough buzz on the A&M defensive tandem of Nick Scorton and Shamar Turner this offseason? Because it doesn't feel like there's been enough of how crazy good they could be at getting to the quarterback, that pairing.
Right. I mean, you can't double team both of them. You know what I mean? So you're almost assuring one of them is going to be all SEC, but we'll just have to see which one.
Yeah, I think both of them are going to be in consideration for preseason All-Americans for me.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of All-Americans, there's going to be a lot down at Ole Miss. Yeah. So appreciate you, cousin Brandon. Hotty toddy. Where do you lean, Stephen, on them Ole Miss Rebels? This over-under win total 9.5. I can't believe that. I still can't believe that. See, what? It's stunning to me they haven't switched this to 11.
Yeah.
Or 10.5, given this schedule, given what they return. This seems like one of the easier ones on the board.
It is. I actually, when you sent over the graphics, I had to make sure my computer didn't cut off a 1, and I was misreading it, thinking that it was 10.5 instead of 9.5. But I like the over. This might be my favorite sort of preseason bet in the SEC. First of all, I think Ole Miss has had 2 double-digit win totals over the last 3 years, and they're coming off the highest win total in school history. And if you just look at it kind of on the most basic level, their offense should be dynamic again. Obviously, I think they'll miss Quinshad Judkins, but they might have 20 running backs added from the portal by the time we get to fall, and some of the receivers. I think their offense is going to be just fine. And I think the fact that the defense is going to be better. I don't know how much better, but Walter Nolan, Princely, you add in the transfers at linebacker in the secondary. To me, this is over. I got them at, like I said, 9.5. I'm taking the over. I think they get to double digits again.
Right. And I hate to just sit here and plug my other shows here, Stephen, but I'm going to do it. Yesterday, I made the argument that Zach Arnett was the hire of the offseason that no one's talking about, just given that, and I nearly broke Cousin Shane's head when I started throwing out these numbers. So bear with me real quick. But the last 2 seasons, Stephen, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Mississippi State held Ole Miss under their points per game, yards per play, passer rating, and third down conversion significantly. And I realized Zach Arnett was fired by the time that game was played last year, but it was his defensive coordinator, his defensive system, his players. I just think that is being overlooked as as a hire that Lane Kiffin can bring in and pick Zach Arnett's brain and say, what were you doing? What do you see that was so effective? And how do you counter what I like to do? And not only that, Stephen, but and I don't say this to be disrespectful to Pete Golding, because I think he's a solid coach, but I think he's a far better recruiter than he is a defensive coordinator. And I would even argue I think Zach Arnett is a better defensive coordinator than Pete Golding. But it doesn't matter because you got them both on the same staff now. We can kind of combine their strengths, so to speak. I think that is being underutilized as what that could do for Ole Miss this fall. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think first of all, it's kind of like adding your enemy to the staff to try to figure out like what are they, how are they figuring out our offense and what are they doing to stop it? Like the intel that they can bring to you and then the adjustments you could make off of that, it's got to be valuable for Lane Kiffin. So I think that's just another reason I think to like this team. Now they've staffed up in the off season. I think the staff has improved with obviously over the last 2 years with the defensive additions, and we know Lane Kiffin is going to find some ways to cook up the offense. I think if you're playing the under here, doesn't it have to be kind of a play that this thing just doesn't go well? The road games are too tough and that things just kind of fall apart, maybe because there's sort of the lack of, maybe I don't want to say lack of culture, but maybe there's that lack of cohesion that you're used to seeing teams that are built 3 and 4 years together. You're just bringing all these transfers in for 1 year and hoping it sticks, right?
I think so. But let me ask you this too, because Kiffin may be crazy enough to do this, Stephen. And, we're already seeing the wildness he's done with the spring game. And, we're seeing coaches that kind of see a different path. And clearly Kiffin's there because he's utilizing the transfer portal, NIL, all that. Let's say, now I realize this is highly unrealistic, Stephen, but let's just say they get destroyed or lose handily by Georgia, which I don't think that's a leap. And then they go into the Egg Bowl at 10-1, and they are number 2 in the SEC, which means, and if they win, they go to the SEC championship, they have to face Georgia again, undefeated Georgia. Is it crazy to suggest that Lane Kiffin would say, well, we're like top 5 in the country, we have a playoff basically locked up. Let's throw the Mississippi State game. Not throw it, but you know what I mean? Like, who cares if we win? And I know that sounds crazy, but we are in a new era. We're in a playoff era. And these NFL teams, they don't give a damn about that Week 17 game if they have their spot secured. And for the sole reason that you don't want to get your head bashed in by Georgia in the SEC championship, you'd rather take a loss and move down the playoff rankings. And you'll probably have to play a little bit earlier in the playoff, but not having to face Georgia that week. Could you see a scenario quite like that? And I realize me saying throw the Mississippi State game, that's a wrong term, but just basically like no tears will be shed if we lose that one. Wink, wink. Like Jackson Dart doesn't, he gets injured in the second half and then he's 100% by the playoff. You know what I mean? Like, could you see a scenario like that?
Congrats to Walker Howard on his first start this year, the Egg Bowl, right? November 30th, Egg Bowl. I had to admit I don't think it's crazy to think some teams might do that. I do think that Lane Kiffin being as ultra competitive as he is, I think if he gets a chance to just destroy Mississippi State, he's probably going to do it. So I would probably lean towards, in this scenario, that's probably not what Kiffin would do, but is it crazy to suggest that some other team in the next 5 years would do something like that? I don't think so.
Right. Well, that was a long way of me saying they're going over. Come on, Steve. Again, 9.5. That's a joke. Ole Miss going to win. I think they win 11 games, and I'm not ready to even concede that they lose to Georgia. I think they are the ones that are positioned the best this season. We'll get to Georgia here in a minute, but I think Ole Miss is perhaps, well, maybe Texas as well. You got to throw them into the mix, but I think more of Ole Miss than I do Texas, believe it or not. I know that most people do not agree with me on that, but I think Ole Miss facing Georgia in Oxford, that's probably the best chance Georgia has of getting a loss this season.
I'd probably go Texas, but it's pretty
Okay.
close. It's
Well,
close. Yeah.
it's okay to be wrong, Stephen. All right, how about let's go Florida Gators here, Stephen. Again, they're another one. It was 5.5. It has been adjusted down to 5. 5 over under wins for them Florida Gators in year 3 under Billy Napier. And this is not lawsuits 5. This is wins here for Billy Napier and company this fall.
I think I've been hanging around you too long because I think you influenced my pick here. I'm going to take the over a little bit reluctantly here. I think, first of all, the schedule is brutal. There's no doubt about it. They were 1 or 2 plays away from beating Missouri on the road last season, would have made a bowl game. I think that may have changed sort of our preseason outlook a little bit on this team. I think obviously the biggest question is going to be the defense. I think the offense is going to be there. Can they get any better on defense? Because early in the season, so many toss-up games with Miami, A&M, at Mississippi State, and UCF, and then even Tennessee and Kentucky, because I'm not really sure they're probably going to get one of those last 5 games, barring a huge upset. But so I think they need to make up the ground early. I'm going to go over sort of reluctantly. I think Florida finds a way to get to 6-6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, great minds think alike, Stephen. Again, the over under is trending in the wrong direction, whereas the hype is growing. They're getting guys out of the portal. I was talking about Wigman earlier, but my pick for the breakout quarterback in the SEC is Graham Mertz, and I get it. He doesn't force the ball down the field, so his completion percentage it's wildly high, but it's a little misleading given that he rarely throws the ball more than 10 yards down the field. But they're just doing what they asked him to do here. 20-3 touchdown to interception ratio. He was red hot to end the season, Steve, before he got hurt. He had, let's see, I got it right here, since October of last season, Stephen, and this is against all SEC opponents, 69% completion percentage, over 1,600 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception. Those are the type of numbers that, if he can duplicate that, and there's no given that he will, but if he can duplicate that, I think Florida's going to go easy over here. I think we're closer to a 7, maybe even an 8-win team. As crazy as that sounds, I love the Gators going to over. Now, if they drop... Now, I say all that. If they lose to Miami, they lose to A&M. We'll fire Billy immediately because we're headed towards 3 wins. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's going to be ugly. So, yeah, I don't think that'll happen. But if it does, well, I think we've got to move on.
I think that one of the maybe good things for Florida here is everybody's going to spend all off season kind of like we are. We're talking about how difficult the schedule is. But I do think there is an opportunity here, I think, for this team to sort of fly under the radar. And I think they have made some nice portal pickups recently. Elijah Badger, the transfer from Arizona State, he caught over 60 passes in back-to-back years. With up and down quarterback play at Arizona State, I think he could be a nice addition to a receiving core. You throw Eugene Wilson, Khalil Jackson, and a couple other guys in there. They've got some weapons for this offense. And again, it really just comes down to this defense and how much it improves with Ron Roberts stepping in there. I was curious to ask you, did the lawsuit at all kind of impact your thinking on the over-under, or is it just sort of secondary kind of in the background at this point?
No, I mean, it didn't really affect the over-under, but it's just, I don't know what it is about Billy Napier in his tenure, but it seems like every time they do something good, it's the old cliche, one step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah.
And this is a perception hit. And this is a reminder to recruits. Hey, and it may not be accurate to even say anymore, but they are literally being sued, or at least Billy Napier is, about, deceiving NIL tactics. So that's not going to sit well with recruits. I mean, how could it?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want is your head coach mentioned with the word fraud in a lawsuit as you go into a critical year, right? That's
well, nope. And speaking of Rashada and ETN here, Stephen, how about them Georgia Bulldogs? 10.5 over under win total, and it's wild to see Georgia this low on an over-under, but I think it's fair, given that they play Clemson right out the gate, this is not the Clemson of They say your Papa's Clemson, as Cousin Shane likes to say. But, still a formidable opener. Bam on the road, Texas on the road, Ole Miss on the road, Tennessee, Auburn at home, Florida and Jacksonville. And throw Kentucky in there. Kentucky, I know they didn't play them well last year, but Kentucky, for whatever reason, plays Georgia about as well as anybody in the SEC. So thoughts on Georgia, Stephen? Where do you lean over under 10.5 win total for them Dogs?
I like the over. Much like A&M and Ole Miss, this was one of my easier picks on the board. I know the schedule is more difficult than last season, but I still think that this is the best team in college football. I think you have to assume that it's really hard to go undefeated every year. It's even harder to go undefeated in the SEC. And of course, Georgia has done that. But I think you have to build in that maybe they could stumble one time. It's just hard for me to see them stumbling twice. So give me the over on Georgia.
Ooh. Let me tell you why you are wrong, Steve. Come on. No Brock Bowers, no Lad McConkey. Again, a freaking murderer's row here. I get it. Carson Beck's awesome. Front runner for the Heisman. Defense is always going to be elite with old Kirby down there. But I was a little concerned, Steven. Just look at some of these run defense numbers for the Dogs last year. 30th in the country yards per rush, 26 in explosive rushes allowed. I don't know. Have we? We were borderline dynasty there. 3 for 3. But I think what really caught up to them was they didn't have the defensive line that they had the last couple of years. I don't know. Now, they got a lot of these guys back, but again, I don't know how dominant they're going to be up front again. I think on the offensive line, we talked about the offensive line numbers earlier. They should be dominant there. So this is going to be a dynamic offense. I like the collection of weapons around Beck. I still don't know if they have any All-American type receivers, tight ends, like Brock Bowers, of course. They probably got several all-conference players, so maybe this is not that big of a worry, but I'm slightly concerned about that. The fact that they had to go into the portal to get running backs and receivers, and they're seemingly having to get receivers every year in the portal, Stephen. And that's when I started to question Alabama, because when Alabama was making their run a couple years ago, they were wide receiver U, and they were getting these guys immediately to play as freshmen, to play well, 3 years off to the NFL. They did that for about 8 years in a row. But when they had to start going to the portal, that's a red flag. And we're seeing it now at Georgia, to where they're having to do that. It's a little bit less of a concern because of all the other talent around them. But give me, and I think it's going to be a wild year, Stephen. I really do. I'm leaning under on Georgia. But I'm not confident about that. But I think at worst, this is a 10-2 football team. But I'm only saying that because, again, at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, tough games. Florida and Clemson away from Athens, and then Auburn and Tennessee traveling too. I just see them tripping up a time or two. And 10-2 with this schedule, you're probably the 3 or 4 seed in the college football playoff. Like, I'm not marking you down too much for a loss or two.
I don't know if history, I guess, isn't necessarily the best way to gauge some of these over-unders. You kind of have to look at it through the lens of just this season. But it is interesting, in just seasons that had a full slate of games, Georgia hasn't been below 11 victories since 2016 when they were 8-5. That's putting aside the 10-game season of 2020. So the history tells us that the over is going to hit here. I think my question to you would be, on Georgia's schedule, most likely 2 losses, would that be at Alabama and at Texas, or are you thinking at Ole Miss is higher on your list than Texas or Alabama?
I would number 1. I think Ole Miss, at Texas probably 2, and then probably at Bama 3, Tennessee 4. If I had to,
interesting,
and maybe Florida number 5 because it's a rivalry, it's away from home. But one area I would critique your list there, Stephen, of they've won 11 or more every year. That's why I'm so excited about this year, Stephen, because instead of who I got to think of here. Instead of playing the East schedule, there's no Vanderbilt here.
Yeah.
We basically subbed out Vanderbilt for Bama. There is no, well, of course, Missouri is really good this year, but there is no South Carolina. Instead of South Carolina, we're playing Texas. Instead of Missouri, we're getting Ole Miss. Yeah, this is a different animal, and there's no telling how this is going to play out. And that doesn't mean that, Georgia's as well as equipped as anybody to handle it because they got the elite roster and the elite coach. But we just don't know. And that's why this year is so exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of like we talked about with the Georgia schedule, I think it just being maybe I think the nation's best team having a significantly tougher stretch to get there at the end of the year adds a little bit of excitement to the SEC race because, if this was just the East and the West breakdown, I don't think there'd be any debate about it now. One loss could be a little bit more impactful depending on who it's to, and also with the fact that if the projections hold true that Texas, Ole Miss, and others will be there, it's going to be a lot more crowded race at the top. So it's definitely setting up for a lot more intrigue, I think, in just a 1-16 breakdown.
Right. I'm not seeing any other donations, so get your donation in if you want your team kicked to the front of the list. But until then, Stephen, let's go Kentucky. Very intrigued by this Kentucky team. Over-unders 6.5 here with, again, a lot of winnable home games, Stephen. That's kind of critical here, the Georgia one being the outlier, but some significantly difficult. I think they're going to be underdog in every road game unless the wheels fall off at Florida. And maybe even if they don't, we could call this that's maybe a 50-50 type game, but I just a slight edge to Florida, given the fact that game is in Gainesville, despite the recent success Kentucky has had down there. Where would you lean over under 6.5 for Kentucky?
This is one that I probably wrestled with the most because I kind of went back and forth between taking the over, and I think I eventually just settled on taking the under and taking 6 and 6. So I look at their schedule like this. I think they've got 4 losses at least, like you said, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas, and then they've got 4 probably swing games because they should go 3-0 outside of the Louisville game in non-conference play. They beat Louisville last year, and I think you could argue that Louisville coming into that game was better, and they beat them. And I think Louisville will kind of be a fringe top 25 team this year, and it's in Lexington. So that might be the game that gets Kentucky to the 7-win mark and hits the over. But I kind of lean under right now only because of just the unknowns of the quarterback play. I think the defense will be pretty solid. I don't know that there's a Ray Davis there at running back, but we mentioned the returning production on the offensive line, good receiving core. This really all comes down to one person. To me, that's Brock Vandagriff.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, yeah. You're right. We're kind of putting our hopes on him. But that being said, I just love this home schedule so much, Stephen. And again, I'm trying not to hype up Kentucky because every year we hype them up. Seems like they come crashing down. But I think it's very realistic that they win every home game outside of Georgia. And if you just do that, you're hitting the over. You're getting a 7-5. And Kentucky, I was about to do what you just did to me, Stephen. I was about to say I don't think they've won under 7 in a non-COVID year since 2016. But we got to throw that out because this is a new year. This is not the East anymore. And instead of catching, they don't have to face Missouri, which is good, but they're getting Ole Miss and Texas. It's tough out here. Again, Auburn, I'm kind of, I'm not as high on many, but give me the over because I think Mark Stoops and company, they built enough. They have the depth. I don't know that they have the overall talent of some of these other teams, but I think they have the depth, and it's a developmental program, which is paramount. They typically have stars that do emerge that we're not talking about in the preseason. Very few people were giving credit to Ray Davis during the preseason, but he was a breakout star in his only season there in Lexington. So I feel pretty good about Kentucky getting to 7 wins.
I could be convinced to do that. Like I said, I was pretty much on the fence there. I think earlier on today, I think I was on the over. Then I think later in the day, I switched to the under. So I can't really disagree with you, Mike. And I think just to take a second to honor kind of our favorite Kentucky Wildcat, Deion Walker. I think one of the best defensive linemen in the country, doesn't get enough respect. So to me, Kentucky's schedule, that game against Auburn. And Louisville kind of stand out to me as kind of the key swing games and getting to that 7, potentially 8-win mark if things break well.
Mm-hmm. Now, how about LSU, Stephen? This is another one that intrigues me mightily here. Over under was at 9.5. It has dropped to 9. Intriguing non-conference game. They should be favored in all of the non-conference games, but Southern Cal and Vegas, UCLA at home. Of course, South Alabama just changed their coach, so that should be a no contest. But where would you lean over under 9 for LSU?
I would probably go with the over. I'm going to go 10. I love the way the schedule kind of breaks down here because they get Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma at home. Also, of course, the road test again into Fayetteville, Texas A&M, Florida. That's going to be difficult, but they should be 4-0 in non-conference play. If they lose to USC, we got a bigger problem because Florida State was a better team than USC is, and so Brian Kelly does not need to lose this opener to USC. But it's right there. I think if it was 9.5, maybe I might take 9, but I'm going to gamble on the home games and LSU pulling off an upset to get to 10-2. I'm not sold totally on the defense, but I think they can find a way to get to double digits.
Well, when I look at LSU, though, Stephen, all I see is these outstanding offensive numbers and all the pieces and coaches they lost on the offensive side of the football, and then the nightmare that was the defense. I mean, this is... literally, it was the best offense in the country and the worst defense.
Yeah.
How in the world what are we doing down here, Brian Kelly? We got to buy us some defensive linemen. Oh, wait, I forgot. We don't do that. No, give me the under on LSU. Ever since I heard those comments from Brian Kelly, I kind of kid, but not really, because I don't know. I think they're a team, Stephen, that we're going to look back at next year and say, man, they wasted Jaden Daniels. They lost 3 games, and they had him and all these great receivers. So I get it. They've won 10 games both years under Kelly, so the assumption is year 3, we're only better. We're going to get there, but I don't know. I'm not sold on them. I would lean, even though these games are at home, I'd probably lean towards Ole Miss and Bama in those games. I think A&M will be tough. Florida, Oklahoma. I think there's a lot of landmines here, Stephen. I think they trip up. They always seem to trip up in a non-conference under Brian Kelly for whatever reason. So I think they slip up there, whether it's Southern Cal or UCLA. I think they lose one of those as well. So I like 8-4. I think 9-3 is the real record, but we're not pushing on this. So I believe 8-4 is more realistic than 10-2. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And also, I think to sort of take a shot at my own pick here, but I do think at South Carolina, at Arkansas, to kind of solidify some of these over-unders that we talked about. Some of these teams, even if they're going to be 5-7, 6-6, are going to be pretty tough outs. It's not easy to go to South Carolina and win. It's not going to be easy, and to go on the road in Fayetteville, and it's sort of a kind of a desperate moment for Arkansas as they try to get to bowl eligibility and pick off some of these teams at home. So it's a little trickier, I think, maybe on the surface than you might expect. Getting Alabama and Ole Miss at home helps, but those road dates are kind of tricky, I think.
Right. And Jesse, he makes potentially a good point here, Stephen, but he says LSU will crush Southern Cal and UCLA on physicality alone. But here's the problem. I'll throw up his defensive stats one more time, Jesse. Maybe you missed them. LSU is not physical, particularly on defensive side of the football. If you are physical, you are not in the 100s in all these meaningful defensive statistics. This is a soft program, at least they have been. And again, are they tougher than the Southern Cal schools? Probably, but again, I don't know. I don't know that this is a tough team. I really don't. And they seem more finesse than anything, and that's kind of my concern with LSU.
I think there's also another concern too that you've brought up a couple times, and I think each time that we talk about it, I start to get more and more concerned. Is where does the ground game come from? Like who's going to be that go-to back? Obviously, with Jaden Daniels off to the NFL, he was your leading rusher. Maybe there's some things you can do in the short passing game with Nussmeier and the receivers to sort of alleviate that loss. I will say this on that schedule: if Brian Kelly loses to UCLA this year, they're going to have big problems because UCLA should be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten this year, and UCLA should. LSU should take care of business against UCLA. So if they don't, fire up the fire brand. Talk again.
All right. How about Oklahoma, Steve? I'm fascinated to see what the Sooners do. First season in the SEC, over under 7.5. Significantly different than old Texas at 10.5 here, but the schedule is much more daunting, I would say, than the Longhorns. So where do you lean? Oklahoma, first season in the SEC, 7.5 over under win total.
I know this is kind of weird to say this, but I almost think this prediction might be different if we inverted the Oklahoma schedule and we gave them all their tougher games at the top and moved some of those Tennessee, Auburn, and maybe even Ole Miss games closer to the end of the season to give them time to sort of reload at some of these spots. I do think Oklahoma might be a touch undervalued because I think their defense is actually going to be pretty good this year. I still got major questions, though, about the offensive line, how all this meshes together in year one. So with all that being said, like I said, I may have teased it earlier. I think they're going to be one of the best 7-5 teams that we've seen in a while. So I'm going to take the under for Oklahoma.
Why do you hate Venables?
I was just praising his defense. I think they're going to be good on defense.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I do as well. But I'll go the over, Stephen. I think if Texas is going to slightly disappoint, I think Oklahoma's going to slightly surprise here in their first season here. I think the Tennessee game at home is very winnable. I think that's going to be a historic showdown. Those fans are going to be excited. Tennessee and at Auburn, that'll probably dictate whether they hit that over or under or not. I'm fascinated to see LSU on a rivalry weekend. That's pretty weird. But, man, buddy, that final three at Mizzou, Bama, and at LSU, I don't know who in the world in the SEC office got pissed off from someone in Norman, but
must be a Texas fan, right?
Right. I mean, it must be here, but I'm feeling fairly confident. I mean, I almost think 9-3 is attainable here, more realistic, I should say, than 8-4. I don't know. I'm just feeling the Sooners right now. They made a huge jump last year. This time last year, Stephen, I didn't even know if Brent Venables would be the coach. I mean, he was that bad, I thought, in his debut season. They were one of the best teams in the country for about 2 months. So year 3, I think that carries over. I think Oklahoma's being disrespected. Give me Oklahoma 9 wins next year. And I'll just go ahead and say it.
I will buy the to use a bad internet term. I think people are sleeping on the Sooners a bit this year, sort of being with Texas being so highly valued coming into the league. I think there's a little bit of like I said, I think people are kind of forgetting that Oklahoma was much better under Brent Venables. And, I think they should feel good about their receiving corps. It's probably one of the best in the country. It really, hate to say it, all comes back to that offensive line. And, it wouldn't totally surprise me at all if Oklahoma beat Texas again this year in that rivalry game. I mean, we saw it last year with Oklahoma pulling off the upset in the last few minutes. So I went under, but to give you an idea, I have Oklahoma as a top, I think 16 overall team in the country in the power rating. So it gives you an idea of how difficult the schedule is and how good of a team they're going to be.
Right. So it's more about the SEC than anything.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, I think if you flipped some of their schedule, if you put like Tennessee at the end of the year, I might feel a little bit better about maybe getting that over to give them some time to sort of sort through some of their offensive line and sort of new pieces on offense. I trust Bill Bedenbaugh, the offensive line coach. I think he'll figure it out. It just may take a little bit of time this season.
All right, Stephen, how about Mississippi State? Their over-under's only 4.5. Debut season of the Jeff Lebby era. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. But can they hit that 5-win? And I think realistically, if you want to call year one just over the moon success, reaching the postseason. Is that attainable for Mississippi State?
Mike, I hate to keep being negative here, but I think I'm going to take the under here for Mississippi State. So first of all, look at the basics of their schedule. They play 6 top 25 teams. For I think a year zero type situation for this program, just with the losses, the change of coaching staff, different schemes. It's going to take some time for this thing to come together. And I think they'll be better late in the season once they have time to mesh. The problem is they get Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss in the month of November. They'll beat UMass. So they should be favored in 3 of those 4 non-conference games. I think Arizona State's going to be toss-up. I think Mississippi State certainly can go on the road and win that. But can you find 2 wins in SEC play? I think home against Arkansas is 1. You kind of have to stretch to get to another, and that's kind of why I went with under on 4.5.
Right, and I even think they could beat Arkansas at home. I mean, heck, they beat Arkansas last year. But I have to agree with you on this one, Stephen. I would lean the under, given that I think 4 is the most likely win total for State this year. Man, what did State do to the schedule, Bakers do? At Texas, at Georgia, back-to-back weeks. And they got a murderer's row to close out, too, at Tennessee, Mizzou, and then at Ole Miss. I mean, my goodness. This is all about the culture and installing the offense, showing that they can make football fun again in Starkville under Jeff Lebby. And I think they can do that, Stephen. I really do. But that there's a world of difference between having it fun and winning a bunch of games, particularly when you're returning an offensive line that's got 4% of the snaps returning.
Yeah, that's a big concern for me. It's just all the transfers trying to mesh together along the offensive line, plus a transfer quarterback, plus a new scheme, plus basically an entirely revamped defense. It's just a lot of new for this team. I think they're going to be exciting to watch because they're going to put up a lot of points. But at the same time, I think it's just going to take some time for this to mesh. If Mississippi State was in a different conference, they could probably steal some more wins. I think this is just a really hard schedule for a coach that's basically, like I said, taking over in a year zero situation.
All right. Well, how about next, Stephen? One of the hottest teams of the offseason here, I guess you could call it. The Missouri Tigers, Stephen, over-under win total. It was at 9.5. This is another one. Trending in the wrong direction, if you ask me. It is shifted to 9 for Missouri. Where do you lean on them when they have an incredibly manageable schedule? I think is the kindest way I could say it.
I like the over. This is up there as far as one of my favorite picks in the over-unders. I think Missouri getting to 10 wins is pretty realistic and should happen based upon this schedule. Pretty good chance. I think probably the only game that they're a for sure underdog in is that game against Alabama. I certainly think at A&M, we get out at South Carolina. That's going to be tough. A little bit worried about the defensive coordinator change and some of the losses there, but this offense is going to be dynamic. I mean, they are going to put up points in a big way this season. I think even if you account for a surprise loss or two, if you give them the loss to Alabama and then maybe somewhere else like at South Carolina, you're still hitting double digits. So I like the over for Missouri.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to smash it. If you needed any indication of where I'm leaning, Stephen, is right here in the cup I'm holding right here. I'm going over on the Missouri Tigers. Yeah, for every reason you said. But I legitimately think, Stephen, this is potentially an 11-win football team.
I agree.
And heck, even 12. I've kind of gone on and on. So let me ask you, because I want to just talk something a little different here. You've hyped up Georgia offense for good reason. You've hyped up Ole Miss offense for good reason, and now Missouri. If you had to pick one, which offense do you think will be the best out of the SEC? Out of those 3, maybe we could probably throw Texas into the conversation as well. But let's just keep it to Georgia, Ole Miss, and Missouri for now. Which offense do you have the most confidence in?
Man, that's a really good question. Like these are, you're picking between like 1A, 1B, and 1C, right? I would probably lean Georgia just because I would have Carson Beck rated number 1 among quarterbacks. I also like their offensive line to be the best in the SEC, probably the best in college football. Not a number one receiver necessarily, but I like the collection. So I would probably lean Georgia ever so slightly over the other two. But like I said, it's 1A, 1B, and 1C.
Yeah, I think that's fine to say that. All right, how about South Carolina, Stephen? A team we've not hit on yet. Over under 5.5 is the win total. Shane Beamer, year 4. The momentum's halted a little bit here for the Gamecocks, but they can seize that by surprising some and reaching the postseason. Where would you lean? Over under South Carolina 5.5.
Let's start with the positives. I think the good news for South Carolina is some of the top teams are coming to Williams-Brice, and that's going to be a tough environment for this team. And I think, as we've seen under Shane Beamer, they will get better over the course of the season. And a lot of this really comes down to how fast you feel Lenore Sellers is developing, because I think if he hits, I think they can get to 6 wins. But this schedule, man, 7 ranked teams. They play at Kentucky in the second week of the season. That's really difficult for a team that's kind of in transition. You could say the same thing too about Kentucky. All of that to say, I've got them on the under at 5-7 right now.
Under, huh? Give me, what do they call it down there? That black magic. Stevie, come on. I'm going over. I just have to do it, Steven, because I think they'll steal one. They always do.
Yeah.
They didn't last year, but they almost always do. And I think they get back to that mojo somehow, some way. And I think last year was more about just the offensive line and the devastation and the ineptitude. That was one thing when Steven sent me over the snap counts. He said, God, look at this South Carolina one with cover your eyes while you look at it. I mean, it was rough. So, yeah, I get it. But a lot of those guys are back. And again, just because you got guys that are back doesn't mean they're going to be good. But a lot of them were for freshmen, and they got seasoned. It's not the way you want to go about it, but that was the way they had to go about it. If they can get better on that offensive line, I really think this team can get to 6. And if they pull a stunner or two, maybe even get to 7. So I don't know. I believe in Shane Beamer. I know some people don't like his antics. I'm not a huge fan of his antics or anything, but I do think he's a good coach, and I like some of the hires he made this offseason. So this is kind of like blind faith here, Stephen, but I'm leaning a little over on South Carolina.
Yeah, I hate to be so negative. Like, I keep taking all the unders on these teams. So, but no, I agree with everything you said. I really struggled with this one because I think South Carolina will get a little bit of a bounce from just having so many injuries last season, so much bad luck. It's bound to break in their favor this season with a bounce or two. So I could easily see 6-6. And if they hit 6-6 with this schedule, I mean, that's a pretty good season, all things considered. And you got your quarterback if he develops into the guy you expect. So I'm not down on Carolina by any means. It's just a really tough schedule.
All right, the moment Cousin Shade has been waiting for here. The Tennessee over under 9. This is another one, Stephen. It was 9.5 not too long ago. Now it's been kicked back down to 9. Tricky non-conference game, NC State, Charlotte. Road opener out of the SEC with Oklahoma, but some manageable home games here. Of course, you can never say Florida's manageable for Tennessee, but that is often the game that dictates what kind of season the Vols have. Where would you lean right now, Tennessee, over under 9 for the Volunteers?
I like the over. I think you mentioned it there. When you look at Tennessee's schedule, there are a couple games early in the season that probably dictate where the season ends up for Tennessee, with NC State and Charlotte, also the road game at Oklahoma. Also, I would throw it at Arkansas because that game comes before Florida and Alabama. But after that, I mean, Tennessee, probably the only game they're going to be an underdog in the rest of the way would be at Georgia. So I think they hit 10-2 this season, and much like Missouri, are going to be in the mix to be kind of a fringe playoff contender this season. So give me 10-2 for the Vols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that pick. You're a wise man, Stephen. I think, honestly, I think 9-3 is also very realistic. That would not stun me, but we're not pushing here. So 10-2 or 8-4. I think, and do you think this is fair, Stephen, that you got to remember, I mean, we got last year we had all, and this year everybody does it. I'm sure you've probably done it, but top coaches lists and all this. And
I'm working on mine right now.
Right. But the point being, this time last year, Josh Heupel was firmly into that top 15, top 20. Tennessee had just won 11 games. Vols are back, and then won 9 wins campaign. And it's like people have forgotten about Josh Heupel. And again, 9 wins at Tennessee, that's probably one of the best 3 years or a top 3 season out of the last 20 at Tennessee. So again, it's not like the wheels fell off or anything. And if 9's a down, then how can I rightfully say 8-4, 9-3? I'm going over too, Stephen. I'm going 10-2. Now it'll depend on Nico, how well he does. But the more time goes on, the more hype you hear about James Pierce. And I saw someone the other day, have him as the number 1 player in all of college football. I wouldn't go that far, but he could be. He could be this year. And if he is, then yeah, I have to say the over. I think Tennessee is poised to bounce back, and I think Josh Heupel shows yet again why this time last year many had him as one of the top coaches in the country.
It's crazy to think that maybe Josh Heupel's stock went down after a 9-win season, right? Like 9 wins in the SEC is pretty dang good. I think the stat that tells the story for Tennessee is they were 11th in the SEC in scoring in SEC only games at 4 points a game. Josh Heupel's offense, I think, is going to be probably unlikely they get held to under 25 points again a game in the SEC this season with Nico. So the offense has a lot of room to grow. Still have questions about this defense, but I think high-powered offense, the track record, the schedule, getting Alabama and Florida at home makes me think they bounce back and get to double digits this year.
All right, last team here, Stephen. Vanderbilt, over under 3. This is another one. It was 3.5. Somehow it's got kicked down to 3, which is just dreadful here. Year 4, I believe, for Clark Lee and company. Do they get that elusive 4th win on the West End there?
This one's tough because I got them at 3 guaranteed victories. I have a hard time finding a 4th one. But since we have to pick, right, I'm going to take the over. And here's my thinking on it. So first of all, like I said, I got them down for 3 victories. Alcorn State, Georgia State, and Ball State. It's hard to go winless in conference play 2 years in a row, right? I know Vanderbilt's pretty bad, but my guess is they just luck into one somewhere along the way. They steal a game. They finish 4-8. So since we got to pick a side, I am taking 4 wins and the over somewhat reluctantly for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. Can they stun the world, Stephen, and beat? Let me ask it to you this way, maybe. On a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised would you be if Vanderbilt stunned us all and beat Virginia Tech in the opener?
Probably close to a 7 or 8. I think Virginia Tech could be a top 25 team by the end of the season. They're pretty good.
Okay. Well, I was thinking you were going to say 10. So that's not as bad as I thought you were going to say.
I gave them a little bit of grace because it's the first game of the year.
But yeah, I mean, man, if we are struggling against Alcorn, Georgia State, which their coach just quit in the middle of spring football, and Ball State, then we got real problems. And we may have real problems, but it's spring, summer, whatever you want to call it. I'm being optimistic. I'm going over on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Get us a win somewhere in conference play. I don't know where it's coming. You could have, in no world, Stephen, 2 years ago did I think they were going to beat Florida and beat Kentucky on the road. Yet they managed to do both of those things. If they can recapture some of that magic, they'll get. Heck, they may even get to 5 wins. You know what I mean? So give me the over for again. This is kind of blind optimism more than anything else.
I was just looking at that schedule and thinking like the most Auburn nightmare scenario would be to beat Alabama and then also lose to Vanderbilt on November 2nd, given, we saw last year with the way that Auburn lost to New Mexico State and they got pounded by Maryland. So, it's sort of just kind of like bouncing back, like good luck, good fortune to steal the game somewhere. So to your point though, I thought after they beat Florida and Kentucky, they were sort of trending up, and last year was just a drastic step back. So they got to just at least find some positive momentum and try to be a little bit more competitive within the SEC this year to get that fourth win and build again in 2025.
And a green wave in the comments, Steven says Vandy versus Florida would be close this year. But unfortunately, they don't play.
Yeah, right. True.
All right, Steven. So we're about to hit the 90-minute mark. So about time to shut this thing down. But I can't thank you enough. Before you go, as always, can you remind the audience where can they find your work and how can they give you a follow?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at AthlonSteven, Steven LCFB on Instagram and Facebook, all CFB365 on YouTube. On sale date for the magazine, June 4th, June 5th. That's when I'd start to check, and we'll have it up on athlonsports.com real soon if you want to start ordering pre-orders for the 2024 preview magazine. Looking forward to getting it in the hands of everybody real soon.
Absolutely. Well, Steven, again, thank you so much coming up with the show topic here. Had a great fun hitting on all these SEC teams with you. Can't thank everybody, each and every one of you for hanging out. Can't thank you enough for that. And those listening back on a later date, we appreciate you as well. But that's going to do it for this episode of the show. We'll catch you all in the next one.